Police sirens screamed through the quiet streets as red and blue lights flashed against the walls of Roosevelt Academy. Students rushed toward the hallway windows. "Elijah Carter, step forward," the principal shouted. Gasps filled the corridor. Two officers stood near the entrance. Elijah didn't move at first. He simply looked up from his locker, calm, almost detached. Daniel, the principal's son, smirked. "Told you he was a freak." The principal pointed directly at Elijah. "You hacked the school system. You thought we wouldn't find out." Whispers spread like wildfire. "The janitor's son? No way. I always knew something was off about him." One officer stepped closer. "Son, we need you to come with us." Elijah slowly closed his locker. He didn't look scared. He looked prepared. 3 years earlier, Elijah had walked into Roosevelt Academy wearing secondhand shoes and a uniform slightly too big for him. His mother worked double shifts cleaning office buildings. His father had died when he was 9. The students noticed immediately. "Hey, isn't that the janitor's kid?" "Yeah, my dad says his mom scrubs floors downtown." Daniel had been the loudest. "So you clean toilets after school too?" Daniel laughed. Elijah said nothing. He never fought back. He failed his first math test. Then another. Then another. Teachers shook their heads. "Some students just don't belong in advanced programs," one teacher muttered. During a tech fair in his second year, Elijah presented a small circuit board project. Before he could explain it, the screen glitched and shut down. Laughter exploded. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Even your project is dumb." The teacher sighed. "Elijah, maybe focus on something simpler next time." Elijah quietly unplugged his device. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. But that night, inside his tiny apartment, something very different happened. His walls were covered in printed spreadsheets, financial records, public funding reports, grant allocations. He stared at his laptop screen, eyes scanning numbers rapidly. "They think I don't understand math," he whispered to himself. His fingers moved fast across the keyboard. He had discovered something during his first year. Roosevelt Academy received millions in federal special education funding, but there were no special education programs, no additional teachers, no equipment, nothing. The numbers didn't match. He checked again, and again, and again. The money was being transferred into shell companies, companies connected to one name, Principal Raymond Daniels. Elijah leaned back in his chair. "If I'm top of the class," he thought, "they'll watch me." So he failed deliberately. He answered half the questions correctly, sometimes less. Invisible students weren't monitored. Invisible students were underestimated. And underestimated people were dangerous. Back in the hallway, Daniel stepped closer as the officers stood near Elijah. "You really thought you were smarter than my dad?" Daniel sneered. Elijah finally spoke. Quietly. "I never said I was smarter." The principal's face was red with anger. "We have proof you accessed internal systems. You're finished." Elijah looked directly at him. "No," he said softly. "You are." The officer placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. Students recorded everything on their phones. As they walked him down the hallway, whispers turned into accusations. Hacker, criminal, fraud. But Elijah's expression never changed. Because this wasn't the beginning of his downfall. It was the final step of his plan. And if you enjoy powerful stories about success, betrayal, revenge, and rising against all odds, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, because what happened next will shock you. The interrogation room was smaller than Elijah expected. Cold walls, one metal table, a single camera blinking red in the corner. An officer sat across from him. "You accessed school financial servers at 2:14 a.m. last Thursday. That's not public information. How did you do it?" Elijah folded his hands calmly. "I didn't access private servers." "Don't play games," the officer snapped. "We traced activity to your IP address." "Yes," Elijah replied. "You traced pattern analysis software running on public datasets." The officer frowned. "Speak clearly." "I built a system that tracks inconsistencies between public funding disclosures and expenditure reports. I didn't break in. I connected dots." The officer leaned back. "You're saying this is a misunderstanding?" Elijah looked straight at him. "No, I'm saying someone else is stealing." Silence filled the room. Outside, his mother sat in the waiting area, hands trembling. She had rushed from work in her cleaning uniform. "My son would never steal," she told anyone who would listen. "He barely speaks to people." Principal Daniels arrived 20 minutes later, suit perfectly pressed, expression controlled. "This is unfortunate," he told the officers. "We gave him opportunity. Some people can't handle privilege." Elijah heard that through the thin wall. He closed his eyes. Privilege. He remembered the first day he overheard Daniels in his office. "Transfer the funds before audit season," Daniels had said on the phone. "Label it equipment upgrades." Elijah had been outside, mopping the hallway while waiting for his mother to finish her shift. He wasn't supposed to hear it, but he did. That night, he started tracking everything. Back in the present, the interrogation door opened. "Your mother wants to see you," the officer said. Elijah stepped into the hallway. His mother rushed toward him. "Elijah, what is happening?" They said, "Hacking?" "Baby, tell me the truth." He held her shoulders gently. "Mom, I didn't hack anything." Tears filled her eyes. "Then why are they doing this to you?" "Because they think I'm weak." She searched his face. "Are you?" He shook his head slowly. "No." Principal Daniels approached them, voice low and sharp. "Mrs. Carter, your son violated federal cybercrime laws." Elijah turned to him. "Show the evidence." Daniel smiled thinly. "We will." In court, Daniel, standing behind his father, whispered, "Game over." Elijah looked at him without emotion. "You really believe that?" 2 days later, news headlines spread across Chicago. Teen hacker from low-income family accused of breaching elite school network. Students avoided Elijah's locker. Teachers refused eye contact. Some parents demanded expulsion before trial. Inside the courtroom during the preliminary hearing, Daniels spoke confidently. "This student manipulated our systems to fabricate financial discrepancies," he said. "He targeted our reputation." Elijah's court-appointed lawyer leaned toward him. "Why didn't you tell me you built software?" "I did," Elijah replied quietly. "You didn't believe me." The lawyer swallowed hard. "Can you prove it?" Elijah looked ahead at Daniels. "Yes." That night in his apartment, while his mother slept restlessly, Elijah opened his laptop. He activated a secure cloud vault. Years of documented evidence filled the screen. Bank routing trails, Shell Corporation registrations, audio recordings, public filings cross-referenced with internal reports. He whispered to himself, "You underestimated the wrong person." But then something unexpected happened. His screen flickered. Access denied. His cloud storage was locked. A message appeared. Unauthorized tampering detected. Elijah's jaw tightened. "They found it," he murmured. The next morning, Daniels held a press conference. "We will not tolerate criminal behavior," he declared. Roosevelt Academy stands for integrity. Reporters applauded his firmness. Inside the courtroom the following week, the prosecutor stood confidently. "We have digital evidence placing Elijah Carter at the center of a coordinated cyber intrusion." Elijah felt his mother squeeze his hand. For the first time, there was real danger, because someone had just tried to erase his proof. The prosecutor adjusted his glasses and faced the judge. "Your Honor, the defendant accessed protected school infrastructure and manipulated financial reports to create false allegations." Murmurs filled the courtroom. Principal Daniels sat upright, composed. Daniel watched Elijah with a smirk. Elijah's lawyer leaned close. "If you have something, this is the time." Elijah stood slowly. His mother grabbed his sleeve. "Elijah, please." He gave her a small nod. "Trust me." The judge looked down. "You may speak." Elijah's voice was steady. "I did not hack Roosevelt Academy." The prosecutor scoffed. "Then explain the digital trail." "I will," Elijah replied. He carried his laptop to the evidence monitor. Daniel's expression shifted slightly. "You said I accessed private servers," Elijah continued. "But every dataset I used is public." He connected the cable. The screen lit up. "Federal Education Allocation Reports," he read. "Publicly available." Next slide. "Roosevelt Academy Annual Expenditure Disclosure." Also public. He clicked again. A dynamic graph appeared. Numbers aligned. Patterns highlighted. "I built a pattern recognition engine," Elijah explained. "It flags discrepancies between allocated funds and reported spending." The judge leaned forward. The prosecutor frowned. "That doesn't prove innocence." Elijah nodded calmly. "You're right." He clicked again. A list of vendor companies appeared, all receiving payments labeled as special education infrastructure. Another click. Corporate registry documents filled the screen. Each vendor traced back to a holding company. Another click. The holding company traced to a private trust. Final click. The trust listed one name. Raymond Daniels. Gasps filled the room. Daniels' face drained of color. That's fake. Elijah didn't look at him. He pressed play. An audio recording echoed through the courtroom. Daniel's voice. Move the funds before audit season. Label it upgrades. The room went silent. The prosecutor turned slowly toward Daniels. That recording is manipulated. Daniel shouted. Elijah spoke again. Metadata verification is attached. He pulled up digital timestamps and authentication logs. I never breached internal servers, he continued. I documented public inconsistencies and recorded conversations I overheard while waiting for my mother after her shifts. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. You were spying. I was cleaning, Elijah replied. The judge raised her gavel. Order. The prosecutor whispered urgently to his assistant. The courtroom shifted. Suddenly Elijah wasn't the accused. Daniel stood abruptly. This is a smear campaign. Elijah's voice cut through the tension. You framed me because you thought no one would believe the janitor's son. Daniels glared at him. You ruined everything. Elijah's expression hardened for the first time. No, you did. The judge called for a recess. Police officers approached Daniels instead. Sir, we need you to step outside. Daniel stood frozen. Dad, handcuffs clicked. This time, the hallway cameras pointed at someone else. Elijah stood beside his mother as reporters flooded the courthouse steps. How did you figure this out? Why didn't you expose it earlier? Elijah answered calmly. Because no one listens to invisible people. A woman in a navy suit approached him quietly once the crowd thinned. My name is Margaret Lawson, she said. I'm with Lawson Analytics. Elijah recognized the company immediately, one of the largest forensic accounting firms in the country. We've been trying to develop predictive fraud software for years, she continued. You built one in a one-bedroom apartment. Elijah didn't smile. It's not finished. It doesn't need to be, she replied. We'd like to fund it. His mother looked at him in disbelief. Fund what exactly? Margaret extended a business card. His future. Elijah stared at the card. For the first time since the sirens that morning, he allowed himself a small breath. But this was not the end. Because power, once exposed, creates enemies. And someone in that courtroom had just lost millions. 3 years later, Roosevelt Academy looked the same from the outside. But inside, everything had changed. News of Raymond Daniels' conviction had spread across the state. Federal investigations uncovered millions in diverted funds. Multiple board members resigned. The Academy's reputation collapsed. Meanwhile, Elijah Carter disappeared from headlines. At least publicly. Behind closed doors, Lawson Analytics funded his fraud detection engine. What began as lines of code in a small apartment evolved into a predictive financial transparency platform used by corporations, universities, and eventually state agencies. At 19, he declined interviews. At 20, he rejected buyout offers. At 21, his company went global. At 22, financial magazines printed one headline that changed everything. Youngest self-made billionaire in America. Investors called him a prodigy. Tech leaders called him disruptive. Elijah still called himself prepared. One quiet afternoon, a black car pulled up in front of Roosevelt Academy. Students gathered near the entrance, whispering, Is that him? No way. The doors opened. Elijah stepped out wearing a tailored suit, calm as ever. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He was steady. The interim principal rushed forward nervously. Mr. Carter, welcome back. Is the board ready? Elijah asked. Yes, they are. Inside the conference room sat the remaining trustees. One cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, we understand you're interested in funding the school. I'm interested in ownership, Elijah corrected. Silence. You want to buy Roosevelt Academy? Another board member asked. Yes. They exchanged looks. You were nearly expelled here, someone muttered. Elijah's gaze sharpened. Exactly. 2 months later, the deal closed. Roosevelt Academy had a new owner. The janitor's son. On reopening day, Elijah stood at the podium in the school auditorium. Students watched carefully. Teachers shifted in their seats. I was told I didn't belong here, Elijah began. No dramatic pause. Just truth. I was told I wasn't smart enough. He scanned the room slowly. I failed exams on purpose. Whispers erupted. Yes, he continued calmly. Because I understood something early. If they see you as weak, they stop watching. He let that settle. I built something powerful in the shadows. Daniel sat in the back row, silent. After his father's conviction, their lifestyle had collapsed. Scholarships were gone. Reputation shattered. Elijah saw him. He didn't ignore him. "I don't believe in revenge," Elijah said firmly. "I believe in correction." He announced 3 changes that day: full scholarships for low-income students, a financial transparency lab run by students, and a program called Different Minds, designed for those labeled slow, quiet, or misunderstood. After the assembly, Daniel approached him hesitantly. "You planned all this?" Daniel asked. Elijah met his eyes. "I prepared." Daniel swallowed. "Do you hate us?" Elijah shook his head once. "Hate wastes energy." Daniel looked down. "I was wrong." "Yes," Elijah replied calmly. "You were." He started to walk away. "Wait," Daniel called softly. "What happens now?" Elijah stopped, but didn't turn fully. "Now," he said, "you decide who you become without your father's shadow." Later that evening, Elijah stood alone in the empty hallway where police once escorted him out. He remembered the whispers, the laughter, the word dumb. His phone buzzed with another investor notification. Another billion added to valuation. He silenced it. Money was never the real victory. Being underestimated was. Because that gave him time. He walked outside into the fading sunlight. If this story moved you, if you believe quiet strength is still strength, if you know someone who's been underestimated, make sure you like this video. Subscribe for more powerful stories that remind you never to judge by appearances. And comment below. Have you ever been underestimated? Elijah Carter was. And he turned it into power. The world underestimated the janitor's son. They won't make that mistake again. Because the truth is, Elijah didn't win because he was lucky. He won because he understood something most people never learn. Silence is not weakness. Failure is not final. And being underestimated can be an advantage. They laughed at him because they measured intelligence by test scores. They dismissed him because of his mother's job. They assumed he was small because his voice was quiet. But what they didn't understand is this. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it studies. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it builds in the dark. Elijah could have exposed the corruption immediately. He could have reacted emotionally. He could have tried to prove himself every single day. Instead, he chose patience over pride, strategy over ego, preparation over validation. And that is why he won. The world will often label you before it listens to you. It will decide who you are based on where you come from. It will mistake calmness for incompetence. It will mistake humility for weakness. But this story proves something powerful. You don't need loud approval to build quiet power. You don't need revenge to achieve justice. And you don't need to fit their definition of smart to change the game. The biggest lesson Elijah left behind wasn't that he became a billionaire. It was that he never allowed other people's opinions to define his identity. He turned invisibility into strategy. He turned rejection into fuel. He turned humiliation into preparation. And when the moment came, he didn't explode. He revealed. That is real strength. That is real intelligence. That is real success. And maybe the reason this story feels personal is because somewhere in your life, someone underestimated you too. Maybe they called you slow. Maybe they said you weren't good enough. Maybe they laughed when you tried. But remember this. Being overlooked is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is the beginning of your advantage.